The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called with unprecedented urgency. Ambassador Velthara of the Zenthari Collective watched the massive holographic display at the center of the chamber flicker to life, her four eyes widening in disbelief at what she was witnessing. Around her, representatives from 47 different species sat in stunned silence as the live feed continued to broadcast across the galaxy. The footage showed a human vessel, the exploration ship Endeavor, caught in what should have been certain death. A Kresh hunting pack had ambushed them near the Outer Rim territories, and by all calculations, the humans should have been torn apart within minutes. The Kresh were apex predators, feared throughout known space for their ruthless efficiency and pack-hunting tactics that had destroyed countless civilizations. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, her brown eyes tracking the three Kresh warships that circled her damaged vessel like sharks scenting blood. Her crew of 65 worked frantically at their stations, trying to restore shields that had been knocked offline by the initial ambush. The Kresh had chosen their moment perfectly, striking just as the Endeavor had emerged from a jump point with depleted energy reserves. "Tactical analysis," Sarah said calmly, her voice steady despite the dire situation. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her uniform showed signs of the earlier impact that had thrown half the bridge crew to the floor. Lieutenant Marcus Webb pulled up the data on his screen, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. 3 Kresh Hunter-class vessels, ma'am. Each one outguns us 2-to-1. They're maintaining a spherical formation, cutting off all escape vectors. Standard pack hunting pattern. They're waiting for us to make a move so they can exploit any weakness. Sarah nodded slowly, her mind racing through possibilities that her training had never fully prepared her for. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 8 months ago, and they were still learning the brutal realities of space politics. The Kresh had a reputation that preceded them across 1,000 worlds. They hunted for sport as much as for territory, and they never left survivors. The lead Kresh vessel moved closer, its organic-looking hull rippling with bioluminescent patterns that served as their form of communication. The translation came through the Endeavor's systems a moment later, the voice guttural and filled with what could only be described as anticipation. "Human vessel, you have strayed into our hunting grounds. Your species is new to the stars. You do not yet understand that there are predators here far beyond anything your world has produced. Prepare to be claimed." The council chamber erupted in murmurs as they watched the broadcast. Many species had fallen to the Kresh over the centuries. Their hunting instinct was legendary, refined over millions of years of evolution on a death world that made most habitable planets look like paradise gardens. They were faster, stronger, and more vicious than almost any species in known space. Ambassador Thexalor of the Primatic Assembly leaned forward in his seat, his crystalline body refracting the light from the hologram. "This is tragic," he said in his resonant voice. "The humans seemed like a promising species, but they chose to explore too far too fast. The Kresh will make an example of them. Perhaps it will teach others to respect the old boundaries." Velthara said nothing, but something about the human commander's expression troubled her. There was no panic in those eyes, no desperate plea for mercy. Instead, there was something she had seen before in the eyes of her own species when they were cornered by superior forces. It was the look of a predator assessing another predator, calculating odds, looking for weaknesses. On the Endeavor's bridge, Sarah listened to the Kresh ultimatum without flinching. She had grown up in the wilderness areas of Montana, spending summers tracking elk and bear with her grandfather. He had taught her that predators relied on patterns, on instincts that were predictable if you understood them well enough. The Kresh were circling, showing dominance, trying to intimidate their prey into making a mistake. "How long until we can restore shields?" she asked. 8 minutes. Engineering Chief Tanaka reported from his station. Maybe 7 if we divert power from life support on the lower decks. Do it. Sarah moved to the tactical station, pulling up the detailed scans of the Kresh vessels they had managed to capture before their sensors were damaged. Marcus, look at this. Their formation isn't random. They're maintaining exact distances from each other, moving in synchronized patterns. What does that tell you? Marcus studied the data, his combat training kicking in. Pack coordination. They're used to hunting together, probably sharing sensor data and tactical information in real time. If one moves, the others adjust to maintain optimal attack positions. Exactly. Sarah's lips curved into a slight smile that would have alarmed anyone who knew her well. They hunt together because their prey usually runs alone, or in disorganized groups. They've never encountered prey that hunts back. She opened a channel to all sections of the ship. All hands, this is the commander. I know you're scared. I know this looks impossible. But I need you to understand something about humans that the Kresh don't know yet. We didn't claw our way to the top of Earth's food chain by being the strongest or the fastest. We did it by being the most persistent, the most adaptable, and the most willing to turn the tables on anything that thought it could hunt us. In the council chamber, several ambassadors exchanged skeptical glances. Bravado was common among species facing extinction, but it rarely translated to survival. Sarah continued, her voice carrying to every corner of her ship. Our ancestors were hunted by creatures that could tear us apart with their claws. They were faster, stronger, had better senses. But we won because we learned to think like them, to predict them, and to use their own instincts against them. Today, we're going to show the Kresh what happens when you mistake humans for prey. The Kresh lead vessel moved closer, its weapons charging with visible energy buildups along its flanks. The translation systems picked up what sounded like laughter from the Kresh commander. Brave words, little human. But words do not stop claws. Words do not deflect plasma. You will learn that your species is soft, slow, and unworthy of the stars. We are the apex. We are the ultimate hunters, and you are simply today's entertainment. Sarah's expression hardened. Marcus, I need you to map their communication frequencies. Show me how they're coordinating. On it! Marcus's fingers flew across his console. After a moment, he pulled up a 3-dimensional display showing pulses of data flowing between the 3 Kresh vessels. They're using a mesh network, ultra-high frequency, very sophisticated. Each ship is constantly sharing targeting data, position updates, and tactical assessments. Can we jam it? Not without them knowing immediately. They'd adapt within seconds. I don't need seconds. I need 1 moment. Sarah turned to her communications officer. Lieutenant Park, can we spoof their network? Make them think one of their ships is sending data when it's actually us? Park's eyes widened as she understood what Sarah was suggesting. It would be incredibly risky. If they detect the intrusion, they'll know exactly what we're trying to do. But theoretically, yes. Their security is based on genetic authentication, not encryption. They've never needed to worry about prey hacking their systems. Because prey doesn't think like that, Sarah said quietly. Prey runs, prey hides, prey begs, humans hunt. She moved back to the command chair, her mind assembling the pieces of a plan that would either save her crew or doom them more quickly. Either way, she refused to go down passively. Here's what we're going to do. Tanaka, I need you to prepare a full reactor overload on my mark. Make it look like a catastrophic failure, not a controlled event. Ma'am, that's suicide, Tanaka protested. Not if we eject the reactor core at precisely the right moment. How long would it take to go critical once we start the overload? 45 seconds, maybe 50. And how fast can we eject? 3 seconds from command. Sarah nodded. Good. Park, you're going to hack into their mesh network. I want you to send false telemetry from their lead ship to the other 2. Make it look like the lead ship is breaking formation to make a kill run on us. Understanding dawned across the bridge. Marcus let out a low whistle. "You're going to make them shoot each other." "Not quite. I'm going to make one of them hesitate at exactly the wrong moment." Sarah pulled up the tactical display, manipulating the hologram with quick gestures. "The Kresh hunt in patterns because patterns work. They've done this 10,000 times against 10,000 species. They know the lead hunter makes the first strike, the flankers move in to cut off escape. It's instinct for them, burned into their DNA over millions of years." She highlighted one of the flanking vessels. "But if this one thinks the lead is breaking pattern and going for a solo kill, its instinct will be to rush in and claim its share. Pack hierarchy demands it. They can't help it any more than a shark can help responding to blood in the water." Velthara watched from the council chamber, her translator working to process the human commander's words. The logic was sound, frighteningly so. The Kresh were predictable in their pack dynamics because those dynamics had never failed them before. They had never needed to evolve beyond their successful hunting strategies. The Kresh lead vessel was almost on top of the Endeavor now, its weapons fully charged and ready to tear the human ship apart. Sarah could see the rippling patterns on its hull intensifying, the equivalent of a predator's growl before the final strike. "Tanaka, start the overload. Make it obvious on their sensors." The Endeavor's reactor began to spike, energy readings climbing into dangerous levels. Alarms blared across the ship as systems started to redline. The Kresh vessels immediately detected the change, their formation tightening as they moved in for the kill. "They think we're going to explode," Marcus reported. "They're moving closer to make sure they can recover any salvage." "Perfect. Park, send the false data now. Make their lead ship's telemetry show it's accelerating for a close-range kill shot." Lieutenant Park's hands trembled slightly as she executed the intrusion, spoofing the genetic markers and injecting false movement data into the Kresh mesh network. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, exactly as Sarah had predicted, the rightward flanking Kresh vessel broke formation. Its instincts, honed over eons, couldn't be denied. If the pack leader was going for the kill, the lower-ranked hunter had to rush in to claim its portion before being left with scraps. The vessel accelerated hard, closing the distance with aggressive speed. "Eject the reactor core, now!" The Endeavor's reactor shot away from the ship, a sphere of contained energy that was seconds from catastrophic failure. Sarah had calculated the trajectory perfectly. The core sailed directly into the path of the rushing Kresh vessel, which had no time to course-correct at its current speed. The Kresh hunter tried to swerve, but momentum betrayed it. The reactor core detonated just as the vessel grazed its outer edge, the explosion catching the ship in a devastating blast that tore through its organic hull. Atmosphere vented into space as the Kresh vessel spiraled out of control, its bioluminescent patterns flickering chaotically. The other two Kresh ships reacted instantly, but their reaction was pure instinct. The remaining flanker abandoned its position to rush to its packmate's aid, while the lead vessel, confused and enraged, tried to re-establish control of the hunt. "Helm, full burn! Get us through that gap in their formation! Marcus, fire everything we have at the lead ship as we pass!" The Endeavor's engines roared to life, the vessel shooting forward through the opening created by the broken Kresh formation. As they passed the lead hunter, every functional weapon on the human ship fired simultaneously, raking the Kresh vessel's hull with plasma and kinetic rounds. The damage wasn't enough to destroy the Kresh ship, but it didn't need to be. Sarah had broken the most important thing about the Kresh. She had broken their pattern, disrupted their pack cohesion, turned their hunting instinct into a liability. The lead Kresh vessel, wounded and confused, let out a series of bioluminescent flashes that the translators interpreted as a mixture of rage and something that might have been respect. The Endeavor limped away at maximum speed, jumping to FTL as soon as their drives could engage. Behind them, the Kresh pack regrouped around their damaged members, but they did not pursue. Something had changed in that engagement, something that would ripple through the Kresh collective consciousness. In the council chamber, absolute silence reigned. 47 species had just watched a prey species turn the tables on the most feared hunters in the galaxy. They had watched humans do the impossible, not through superior technology or physical prowess, but through predatory thinking that matched and exceeded the Kresh at their own game. Ambassador Velthara rose slowly from her seat, her four eyes fixed on the now empty display where the human ship had vanished into faster-than-light travel. "Honored council members," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber, "I believe we need to significantly revise our assessment of humanity. What we just witnessed was not luck. It was not desperation. That was a predator recognizing another predator and choosing to fight rather than flee." Ambassador Thexalor's crystalline form seemed to dim slightly. "They turned the Kresh's own instincts against them. I have never seen such a thing in all my years on this council." "Because most prey species think like prey," Velthara said quietly. "They run, they hide, they plead for mercy. Humans are different. On their world, they were both prey and predator. They learned to think like the creatures that hunted them, and then they became better hunters than any of them. We have invited a new apex predator into the galactic community, and we never realized it." The broadcast ended, but the recorded footage would be analyzed 1,000 times over in the coming days. Military strategists across the galaxy would study every second of the engagement, trying to understand how the humans had survived. Psychologists would debate the implications of a species that could so seamlessly switch between being hunted and being the hunter. But for Sarah Chen and the crew of the Endeavor, limping toward the nearest human outpost with a missing reactor and half their systems offline, the significance of what they had done was just beginning to settle in. They had survived because they had refused to be prey. They had survived because humanity's greatest weapon had never been strength or speed or advanced technology. It had always been the willingness to understand the predator's mind and use it against them. It had always been the hunter's instinct that lurked in every human heart, the legacy of 1,000,000 years spent clawing to the top of the food chain on a planet that had tried very hard to kill them. The galaxy had been watching. The galaxy had seen what happened when humanity's hunter instinct awakened, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The news of the Endeavor's survival spread through the galactic community like wildfire through dry grass. Within 48 hours, every major news network across known space was running analysis of the encounter, replaying the footage from dozens of angles, bringing in experts to explain what should have been impossible. The humans had not just survived an encounter with the Kresh, they had humiliated them. Captain Marcus Webb stood in the temporary command center on Haven Station, watching the news feeds with a mixture of pride and concern. The Endeavor was currently in dry dock, undergoing extensive repairs that would take weeks to complete. Commander Chen had been called back to Earth for debriefing with the Admiralty, leaving him in charge of the crew and dealing with the aftermath of their sudden fame. "Another interview request," Lieutenant Park said, walking into the command center with a data pad. "This one's from the Vortan News Collective. They're offering quite a lot of credits for exclusive access to the crew." Marcus shook his head. "Tell them the same thing we've told everyone else. No interviews until the official investigation is complete." He rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of exhaustion settling into his bones. "How many does that make?" 273 in the last 36 hours. Park set down the data pad with a sigh. "Sir, they're not going to stop. What we did out there, what Commander Chen did, it's changed something fundamental. Species that have spent centuries living in fear of the Kresh are suddenly seeing hope. They want to understand how we did it." "We got lucky," Marcus said, though even he didn't fully believe it. He had been on that bridge, had watched Sarah Chen piece together her strategy with calm precision, while certain death circled their ship. Luck had played a part, but it wasn't the whole story. On the other side of the station, in a secure conference room, Ambassador Velthara sat across from 3 human diplomats. The lead diplomat, Ambassador Patricia Okonkwo, was a veteran of Earth's corporate negotiations who had transitioned into galactic diplomacy when humanity joined the Council. Her dark skin showed the subtle lines of someone who had spent decades reading people and situations with expert precision. Ambassador Velthara, Patricia said formally, folding her hands on the table. We appreciate you reaching out for this meeting. As you can imagine, the past few days have been rather overwhelming for humanity's diplomatic corps. Velthara's translator rendered her response into English with its usual clinical precision. I imagine so. Your species has gone from being a curious newcomer to being the subject of intense scrutiny across the galaxy. The footage of the Endeavor's encounter has been viewed more than 70 billion times across our networks. We're aware, Patricia said carefully. We're still trying to understand the full implications ourselves. Then allow me to be direct. Velthara leaned forward, her 4 eyes fixing on the human ambassador with an intensity that would have been unsettling if Patricia hadn't spent years negotiating with alien species. What your Commander Chen did was not random. It was not born of desperation. That was tactical thinking at its finest, the kind of strategic adaptation that most species take centuries to develop. She thought like the Kresh, predicted their behavior, and exploited their instincts. That is not the thinking of prey. Patricia maintained her diplomatic composure, but internally she felt a chill. She had spent hours reviewing the footage herself, consulting with Earth's top military strategists and behavioral psychologists. Their assessment had been unanimous and somewhat frightening. Sarah Chen had demonstrated a level of predatory thinking that revealed something about humanity that most of them had never fully articulated. Ambassador Velthara, I'm not sure what you want me to say. Commander Chen did what she had to do to save her crew. She used the resources available to her and made difficult decisions under extreme pressure. Any competent officer would have done the same. No, Velthara said flatly. Any competent officer would have tried to run, or tried to negotiate, or prepared for honorable death. Your commander hunted the hunters. She turned the most feared predators in the galaxy into her prey, even if only for a moment. And now the entire galaxy is asking the same question. If humans can do that to the Kresh, what does that mean for the rest of us? The implications hung in the air like smoke. Patricia understood the subtext immediately. Fear. The Galactic Council had welcomed humanity as a minor species, technologically primitive by galactic standards, expected to take centuries to become significant players in interstellar politics. But the Endeavor incident had revealed that humans possessed something that transcended technology, a predatory adaptability that had been honed by millions of years of survival on a planet that seemed designed to kill them. Are we having this conversation because your government is afraid of us? Patricia asked quietly. Velthara was silent for a moment, a gesture that her species used to indicate careful consideration. My government is concerned, as are most of the council members. For thousands of years, we have known our place in the galactic hierarchy. The strong protect the weak, the advanced guide the primitive, the Kresh hunt, and we stay out of their way. But humans do not seem to fit into any of our established categories. You are technologically young, but mentally dangerous. You think like predators, but act with the cooperation of prey species. You are a paradox that makes us uncomfortable. Patricia allowed herself a small smile. Ambassador, let me share something with you about human history. For most of our existence, we were prey. We were hunted by creatures stronger, faster, and more vicious than us. We survived by thinking our way out of impossible situations, by adapting faster than our predators could evolve. When we finally became the dominant species on our planet, it wasn't because we became the strongest. It was because we became the smartest, the most persistent, and the most willing to turn the tables on anything that threatened us. "This is precisely what concerns us," Velthara said. "That mentality served you well on your world. But the galaxy is not Earth. There are species here with weapons that could sterilize your entire planet in minutes. There are empires that span thousands of star systems. If humans approach galactic politics the way you approach threats on your homeworld, the consequences could be catastrophic." Before Patricia could respond, an urgent message came through on her communication device. Her expression shifted as she read it, a mixture of alarm and grim satisfaction crossing her features. "Ambassador Velthara, I think you need to see this. It appears that the Kresh are not taking their humiliation quietly." The secure screen on the wall activated, showing a news broadcast from the frontier regions. A Kresh war fleet, comprising 20 vessels, had just entered the territory near Haven Station. The lead ship was broadcasting a message that was being translated and rebroadcast across every channel. The Kresh war leader's voice was a guttural snarl that made even the sophisticated translation systems struggle. "Humans, you have insulted the honor of the pack. You have wounded our pride with your trickery and cowardice. We are the apex predators of this galaxy, and we do not tolerate prey that bites back. We come now to finish what was started. We come to show you that your survival was nothing but temporary luck. Prepare yourselves. The great hunt is about to begin." Marcus Webb received the same notification in the command center on Haven Station, and his blood ran cold. 20 Kresh warships against one damaged exploration vessel and a civilian station with minimal defenses. This wasn't a hunting expedition. This was an execution, broadcast for the entire galaxy to see. The Kresh wanted to make an example of humanity, to restore their reputation by crushing the species that had dared to embarrass them. "Get me a secure line to Earth Command," Marcus ordered, his voice tight with tension. "And someone find out where Commander Chen is right now." Sarah Chen was actually in a conference room deep within Earth's Admiralty headquarters in Geneva, facing a panel of admirals and generals who were still trying to process the implications of her actions. Admiral Jiang Wei, the head of humanity's fledgling space navy, studied her with the calculating gaze of a man who had spent 40 years understanding warfare. "Commander Chen," he said, his English carrying the slight accent of his native Mandarin, "you've put us in a very difficult position. Your actions saved your crew, which is commendable. But you've also painted a target on humanity's back. The Kresh are mobilizing a war fleet as we speak, and intelligence suggests they're heading straight for Haven Station. 20 warships, Commander. 20. Sarah stood at attention, her expression neutral despite the churning in her gut. "Sir, with respect, we were already a target the moment we entered their territory. The Kresh don't need reasons to hunt. They need opportunities. If we had died out there like they expected, they would have marked us as weak and hunted us anyway. At least now they know we're dangerous. Dangerous enough that they want to exterminate us before we become a real threat," Admiral Jiang said bluntly. "Your predatory thinking may have saved 65 lives. But it might cost billions if this escalates into full-scale war." "Then what should I have done?" Sarah asked, her composure cracking slightly. "Should I have let them kill my crew to avoid offending them? Should we apologize for refusing to be prey?" "We should have been more cautious about where we explored," another admiral interjected, his tone sharp. "We should have understood our limitations as a new species in a dangerous galaxy." "Our limitations?" Sarah's voice rose despite her best efforts to maintain military decorum. "Admiral, I grew up hunting in Montana. My grandfather taught me that the most dangerous moment in any hunt is when the prey stops running and turns to face you. Predators rely on prey behaving like prey. The moment you break that expectation, you change the entire dynamic." "The Kresh are coming for us now because we broke their pattern. because we made them question their own dominance. That's not a weakness. That's an opportunity. Admiral Jang held up a hand, silencing the brewing argument. Explain. Sarah moved to the holographic display in the center of the room, pulling up star charts and tactical data with quick gestures. The Kresh hunt in packs because it's effective against species that panic. But pack dynamics have vulnerabilities. They rely on hierarchy, on established patterns of behavior that have worked for millions of years. They're coming with 20 ships because they want overwhelming force. But that many ships means complex coordination. If we can disrupt that coordination, turn their numbers into a liability instead of an advantage, we can do more than survive. We can break them. You're suggesting we fight, Admiral Zhang said slowly. I'm suggesting we hunt, Sarah corrected. There's a difference. Fighting is about matching force against force. Hunting is about understanding your target so well that you're always 3 steps ahead. The Kresh think they're the galaxy's apex predators because no one has ever challenged that assumption. What if we show them they're wrong? The room fell silent. What Sarah was proposing went against every diplomatic instinct, every careful strategy of slow integration into galactic society that humanity had planned. But it aligned with something deeper, something that resonated with the primal part of the human psyche that had survived ice ages and megafauna extinctions. Admiral Jang studied the tactical displays, his mind running through scenarios and possibilities. Finally, he spoke. Commander Chen, you're not going back to Haven Station. You're going to our shipyards at Titan. We're assembling a fleet, and you're going to help train our captains in what you're calling predatory tactics. If the Kresh want a hunt, we'll give them one. But they're going to learn that humans have been playing this game longer than their species has existed. Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with apprehension. Sir, we're talking about confronting the most feared military force in the galaxy with ships that are decades behind their technology. Yes, Admiral Jang said simply. We are. But technology isn't everything, is it? You proved that when you beat them with a dying ship and a clever plan. Now we're going to prove it on a scale that will make the entire galaxy reconsider their assumptions about humanity. He pulled up a classified file, sharing it with the room. For the past 6 months, we've been reverse engineering alien technology from artifacts we've acquired through trade and salvage. We're not as primitive as the Council thinks. But more importantly, we have something that no other species has developed to the same degree. We have the accumulated hunting wisdom of a species that spent millions of years as both predator and prey. Every tactical doctrine, every combat manual, every strategic principle we've developed comes from that crucible. The Kresh are about to discover what happens when you pick a fight with a species that turned hunting into an art form. The plan that emerged from that meeting was audacious to the point of insanity. Humanity would take its entire combat-capable fleet, less than 40 ships, and intercept the Kresh war party before it reached Haven Station. They would choose the battlefield, set the terms of engagement, and demonstrate to the galaxy that being the new species didn't mean being weak. Word of the plan leaked almost immediately, as such things always did. Within hours, the Galactic Council was in emergency session, with ambassadors from dozens of species arguing frantically about whether to intervene. Some wanted to broker peace, to prevent what they saw as humanity's imminent extinction. Others saw opportunity, a chance for the Kresh to be brought down a few levels by any means necessary. Ambassador Velthara watched the debate with growing unease. She had spent the past days studying everything available about human history, reading their literature, analyzing their warfare patterns. What she found had both fascinated and terrified her. Humans had spent their entire existence fighting against impossible odds and somehow winning. They had survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and each other. They had developed weapons specifically designed to kill from a distance because they couldn't match their prey in physical combat. They had turned persistence hunting into a tactic that could run prey to exhaustion over days of continuous pursuit. They were, she realized, the ultimate adaptive predators, not the strongest or the fastest, but the most dangerous because they never stopped learning, never stopped adapting, never accepted defeat as final. The Kresh were about to encounter something that their millions of years of evolution had never prepared them for, prey that had evolved specifically to hunt hunters. As the council debated, Velthara made a decision. She opened a secure channel to Patricia Okonkwo. "Ambassador, I need to speak with your military command. I have information about Kresh pack dynamics that might help you survive what's coming." Patricia's image appeared on the screen, her expression showing surprise and cautious hope. "You're offering to help us?" "I'm offering to help ensure that the galaxy doesn't lose a species with potential," Velthara corrected. "But also, I confess, I want to see if humans can actually do what I think you're capable of. You've awakened something in my people, too. Commander Chen's actions reminded us that we once had to fight for our place in the galaxy. We've grown comfortable, complacent. Perhaps it's time someone reminded all of us what it means to be challenged." The pieces were moving into position. The Kresh war fleet was accelerating toward Haven Station with murderous intent. The human fleet was preparing to launch from Titan, crews training frantically in tactics that merged human military doctrine with what they were learning about alien pack dynamics. And across the galaxy, billions of beings watched and waited to see if humanity's hunter instinct was enough to save them from extinction, or if they had simply angered predators far beyond their ability to defeat. The great hunt was about to begin, but for the first time in the Kresh's long and violent history, they weren't the only hunters in the galaxy. And they were about to learn that there was a difference between being an apex predator on your own world and being one of many predatory species scattered across the stars. Humanity had earned its place at the top of Earth's food chain through millions of years of adaptation and survival. The Kresh were about to discover what happened when that evolutionary pressure was unleashed on a galactic scale. The broadcast feeds continued. The galaxy watched, and deep in the planning rooms of human military command, Sarah Chen marked positions on star charts and smiled like a wolf preparing to spring a trap. The human fleet assembled at Rally Point Theta looked pathetically small compared to the Kresh war party bearing down on Haven Station. 38 vessels ranging from destroyers to frigates, with Sarah Chen's rebuilt Endeavor serving as the flagship for the operation. Against them came 20 Kresh warships, each one a biotechnological marvel that had been refined over millions of years of aggressive evolution and conquest. Admiral Zhang Wei stood on the bridge of the heavy cruiser Valiant, watching the tactical displays with an expression that gave nothing away. Beside him, Sarah Chen coordinated with the fleet captains through rapid-fire communications, her voice calm and precise despite the enormity of what they were attempting. "All ships, this is Endeavor Actual," Sarah transmitted across the secure fleet channel. "Remember your training. The Kresh will try to establish pack formation and use their superior numbers to overwhelm us. We're not going to let them set the terms. We're going to fragment their cohesion and force them to fight as individuals instead of as a coordinated pack. Trust your wing partners, trust the plan, and remember that we're not trying to match them in strength. We're trying to outthink them." Across the galaxy, the broadcast feeds were active again. The Galactic Council had established secure observation points, unwilling to miss what many assumed would be humanity's final stand. Hundreds of species watched with a mixture of morbid curiosity and genuine anxiety. Some had placed bets on how long the humans would last. The optimists gave them 20 minutes. The pessimists said 5. Ambassador Velthara sat in her private observation chamber, surrounded by tactical analysts from her government. They had spent days going over human military history, studying everything from ancient Rome's legion tactics to modern combined arms warfare. What they found was a species that had turned warfare into a science, developing strategies and counter-strategies with a sophistication that most species reserved for art or philosophy. The humans are positioning their fleet in a dispersed formation, one of her analysts noted, highlighting the tactical display. That's unusual. Most species would cluster together for mutual defense. Velthara nodded slowly. They're not thinking defensively. They're setting up a hunting formation. Look at the spacing. Each ship has clear lines of sight to multiple vectors, but they're maintaining distance from each other. They're creating a net, not a wall. The Kresh war fleet emerged from their final jump, the massive bio-ships rippling with predatory anticipation. Their formation was a textbook example of pack hunting at its finest, a dense core of heavy hitters surrounded by fast-moving flankers designed to cut off any escape routes. They had used this formation to destroy thousands of fleets over the centuries. It had never failed. The Kresh war leader, identified through intelligence channels as Pack Master Krell Thor, transmitted his declaration across all frequencies. His translated words dripped with contempt and bloodlust. Humans, you have made your species' final mistake by choosing to face us in open battle. We are the ultimate predators, refined by millions of years of successful hunts. Your clever trick against our scouts meant nothing. Against a true war pack, you will learn the meaning of helplessness. Your ships will be torn apart. Your crews will scream for mercy that will not come, and your species will serve as a cautionary tale for the next 10,000 years. Prepare to be prey. Sarah listened to the transmission without emotion, though she felt the weight of billions of eyes watching this moment. The next few minutes would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. They would either prove themselves capable of standing among the stars, or they would become a footnote in galactic history, another species that reached too far too fast. All ships, weapons free, she transmitted. Execute pattern alpha on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark. The human fleet exploded into motion, but not in the direction the Kresh expected. Instead of clustering together or attempting to flee, the ships scattered in pre-planned vectors that looked chaotic, but were actually precisely calculated. The formation resembled nothing so much as a school of fish evading a predator, except this school was moving with purpose toward specific coordinates. The Kresh war leader snarled in confusion as his prey refused to behave correctly. All ships, pursue and destroy. Flankers, cut off their escape routes. Heavy ships, converge on the largest concentrations. The Kresh fleet broke formation to chase down the scattered human ships, their pack instincts driving them to corner and destroy prey that was running. But Sarah had studied the footage of their previous encounter 1,000 times, had consulted with Earth's best behavioral psychologists about pack hunting dynamics. She knew that the Kresh couldn't help themselves. When prey scattered, predators had to choose targets, and choosing targets meant breaking cohesion. Endeavor to all ships, they've taken the bait. Begin Phase 2. What happened next would be analyzed in military academies for centuries. The scattered human ships suddenly reversed course, but not randomly. Groups of 3 to 4 vessels converged on individual Kresh ships that had pushed too far ahead of their pack in their eagerness to make kills. The humans had turned the Kresh's own aggression against them, isolating the most eager hunters from their support. The first Kresh ship to realize its mistake was a fast attack variant that had chased what it thought was a fleeing destroyer. Instead, it found itself facing 3 human frigates that had looped back with perfect timing. Their combined fire tore into the Kresh ship's organic hull, overwhelming its biological defenses through concentrated firepower at close range. "Target down," Marcus Webb reported from his position, commanding one of the frigate squadrons. "Moving to next engagement zone." The Kresh war leader roared commands, trying to re-establish pack cohesion, but the damage was done. His fleet was scattered across too much space, and the humans were exploiting every gap with ruthless efficiency. When Kresh ships tried to regroup, the humans would concentrate fire and then break away before the superior numbers could be brought to bear. When individual Kresh ships tried to pursue, they found themselves facing coordinated ambushes that negated their technological advantages. It was predation in reverse, and the psychological impact on the Kresh was devastating. For the first time in their species' memory, they were the ones being hunted, their instincts being turned against them by prey that had somehow learned to think like them, to predict their moves, to exploit their nature. "Humans fight like cowards," Krelthor transmitted, his voice raw with frustrated rage. "You refuse to face us with honor. You scatter like insects." Sarah allowed herself a cold smile as she transmitted her response on open channels for the entire galaxy to hear. "We fight like hunters, Packmaster. You've spent millions of years perfecting your tactics against prey that panics. We spent millions of years learning to hunt predators. There's a difference." She coordinated the next phase of the engagement with practiced ease, directing her fleet like a conductor managing an orchestra. Human ships danced through the battle space, never staying in one place long enough to be pinned down, always moving, always adapting, always finding the next weakness in the Kresh formation. In the council chamber, stunned silence had given way to frantic discussion. Species that had cowered before the Kresh for centuries were watching them being systematically dismantled by a numerically inferior force using nothing but superior tactics and predatory thinking. "They're not even using particularly advanced technology," one military observer noted with disbelief. "Those are standard weapons, standard drives. The humans are winning through pure tactical superiority." Ambassador Velthara felt a strange sensation that took her a moment to identify. Vindication mixed with awe. She had told the council that humans were dangerous, that they represented a new kind of threat in the galaxy, but even she hadn't fully comprehended the implications until now. Humanity hadn't just survived the crucible of Earth's evolution. They had been forged by it into something that the galaxy had never encountered before. A species that could adapt their hunting strategies to any prey, including other predators. The battle raged for another 40 minutes, but the outcome became increasingly clear. The Kresh war fleet, designed for overwhelming aggression and pack hunting, couldn't adapt to facing opponents who understood pack dynamics better than they did. Every attempt to regroup was countered. Every aggressive push was turned into a trap. The humans had done their homework, studying not just Kresh tactics but Kresh psychology, understanding that millions of years of successful hunting had made them predictable. When the fourth Kresh warship fell to coordinated human fire, Krelthor finally made the decision that no Kresh war leader had made in recorded history. He called a retreat. The remaining 16 ships of his fleet broke off the engagement and jumped to FTL, leaving behind debris fields and damaged vessels that couldn't make the jump. Sarah immediately transmitted orders to cease pursuit. "All ships, hold position. Do not pursue fleeing vessels. Render assistance to any Kresh survivors and treat them according to the galactic conventions on warfare." That last command sent shockwaves through the observing species. The humans had defeated the Kresh decisively, but they weren't acting like victorious predators. They were showing mercy to defeated enemies, offering aid to survivors. It was a demonstration of controlled violence, of the ability to turn aggression on and off at will. To many species, it was more frightening than the battle itself. Admiral Jiang Wei allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before turning to the next challenge. "Commander Chen, well executed. Now comes the harder part, convincing the galaxy that we're not going to use these tactics against them." Sarah nodded, understanding the complexity of their situation. They had proven humanity could fight and win against superior forces. Now they had to prove they could be trusted with that capability. "Sir, I recommend we invite the Galactic Council to send observers to our tactical training facilities. Show them exactly how we think, how we plan, how we fight. Transparency might be our best weapon now. The aftermath of the battle played out across countless news feeds and diplomatic channels. The Kresh Collective, for the first time in their history, requested a formal ceasefire and negotiations with humanity. They had learned what it meant to be prey, and the experience had fundamentally altered their perception of the galactic hierarchy. More significantly, dozens of species that had lived under the shadow of Kresh aggression began reaching out to humanity, seeking military alliances, tactical training, and protection. Humanity had demonstrated something that military superiority alone could never achieve: the ability to defeat seemingly unbeatable opponents through intelligence and adaptability. 3 days after the battle, Sarah stood in the observation deck of Haven Station, looking out at the repaired Endeavour and the growing fleet of human vessels being stationed in the system. Ambassador Velthara had requested a private meeting, and Sarah had agreed, despite her exhaustion. The Zenthari ambassador approached with her characteristic graceful movement. "Commander Chen, I wanted to speak with you personally before the formal diplomatic proceedings begin." "Ambassador," Sarah acknowledged with a respectful nod. "You have changed the galaxy in ways that will take decades to fully understand," Velthara said, her 4 eyes studying the human with undisguised fascination. "My species has been part of the Galactic Council for 6,000 years. In all that time, we have never seen anything like what your species accomplished in a matter of months. You went from being an unknown newcomer to defeating the most feared military power in known space." "We did what we had to do to survive," Sarah said simply. "Nothing more." "No," Velthara corrected gently. "You did much more than survive. You demonstrated a form of warfare that most species have never developed because they were never forced to. Your planet made you into adaptive predators, capable of learning from any opponent and turning their strengths into weaknesses. That is a rare and precious capability in the galaxy." She moved closer to the observation window, her reflection blending with the stars beyond. "I have been authorized by my government to extend an invitation to humanity. The Zenthari Collective would like to establish a defensive alliance with your species. We believe that together, we could bring stability to regions of space that have known only violence for centuries." Sarah considered the offer carefully, thinking about the implications for humanity's future. "I'm just a ship commander, Ambassador. Decisions like that are above my authority level." "Perhaps," Velthara acknowledged. "But you are also the person who awakened humanity's hunter instinct when it was most needed. Your voice will carry weight in whatever decisions your species makes going forward." The conversation was interrupted by a priority transmission from Earth. Admiral Zhang Wei's image appeared on the communication panel, his expression serious but not alarmed. "Commander Chen, we've received formal communication from the Kresh Collective. They're requesting a personal meeting with you specifically. They say they wish to understand what they call the human way of hunting. Apparently, you've impressed them enough that they want to learn from you." Sarah felt a mix of surprise and irony at the request. The Kresh, the galaxy's apex predators, wanted lessons from the species they had tried to destroy. "What's Earth's position on this, sir?" "The diplomatic corps thinks it's an opportunity to establish long-term peace. The military command thinks it might be a trap. I think it's a chance to reshape how the Kresh interact with the galaxy, and that's worth the risk. The decision is yours, Commander. You're the one who beat them. You're the one they want to talk to." Sarah looked out at the stars, thinking about her grandfather's lessons from those Montana hunting trips so many years ago. He had taught her that the best hunters weren't the ones who killed the most prey. They were the ones who understood the balance of the ecosystem, who knew when to hunt and when to let prey recover, who saw themselves as part of nature rather than separate from it. "Tell them I'll meet," she said finally. but on neutral ground, with full diplomatic protocols and council observers. If the Kresh are serious about learning to coexist rather than just dominate, then humanity should be serious about teaching them. Admiral Zhang Wei smiled slightly. Acknowledged, Commander. You're being promoted to captain, effective immediately, and assigned as humanity's primary military liaison to the Galactic Council. Apparently, turning predators into students is now part of your job description. As the communication ended, Sarah turned back to Ambassador Velthara. You said I awakened humanity's hunter instinct. But what we really awakened was the galaxy's understanding that hunting isn't just about strength or aggression. It's about adaptation, intelligence, and knowing when to fight and when to show mercy. That's what Earth taught us over millions of years. Maybe that's what we can teach the galaxy now. Velthara's translator rendered what might have been a laugh. You may find that being a teacher is more challenging than being a warrior, Captain Chen. But I believe humanity is uniquely qualified for the role. You have walked the path from prey to predator and learned wisdom from both perspectives. That is something the galaxy desperately needs. The broadcasts continued, but their tone had shifted. Instead of waiting to witness humanity's destruction, the galaxy was now watching to see how humans would use their victory. Would they become new predators, using their tactical superiority to carve out an empire? Or would they offer something different, a model of strength tempered by restraint? In the weeks that followed, humanity began the delicate work of transforming from galactic newcomers to established players. Military academies across human space started offering courses in what was being called adaptive predation tactics to allied species. Diplomatic corps worked overtime to establish treaties and alliances that would prevent the power vacuum left by the Kresh's defeat from destabilizing entire regions. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, the reluctant face of humanity's emergence as a military power. She gave lectures to alien military commanders about predatory psychology, consulted with the Galactic Council on security matters, and yes, eventually sat across a negotiating table from Kresh leaders who were struggling to understand how they had been so thoroughly defeated. The meeting with the Kresh was tense, but productive. Packmaster Krell, his pride still wounded but his mind sharp, listened intently as Sarah explained human tactical philosophy. Your mistake, she told him through the translators, was assuming that because you had been successful for millions of years, your tactics were unbeatable. But every predator eventually encounters prey that adapts. On Earth, the predators that survived weren't the strongest. They were the ones who could change their hunting strategies when their prey evolved new defenses. You stopped evolving because you didn't need to. We never had that luxury. Krellthor's bioluminescent patterns flickered in what the translators indicated was contemplation. You speak truth, human. We have been apex for so long that we forgot that other species might still be climbing toward that peak. Your kind climbed faster and further than we anticipated. This is humbling. It doesn't have to be humiliating, Sarah said, choosing her words carefully. The galaxy has room for multiple apex predators. As long as we understand that true strength isn't about dominating everyone else, it's about knowing when to hunt and when to coexist. Earth taught us that predators who wipe out all their prey eventually starve. Balance is more important than dominance. The concept was alien to Kresh thinking, but Sarah could see Krellthor struggling to integrate it into his worldview. It would take time, perhaps generations, for the Kresh to fully adapt to a galaxy where they weren't automatically at the top of every hierarchy. But the conversation was a beginning, and beginnings were precious things. Ambassador Patricia Okonkwo watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. Humanity had navigated the treacherous path from unknown newcomers to respected military power in record time. But the real test would be maintaining that position without becoming the very thing they had defeated, predators who knew only how to hunt and never how to coexist. As the formal meetings concluded, and Sarah prepared to return to her duties, she received a personal message from Admiral Jiang Wei. It was brief and to the point, as all his communications tended to be. "Captain Chen, your grandfather would be proud. You took the lessons he taught you about hunting in Montana and applied them on a galactic scale. But remember the other lesson he taught you. The best hunters know when to put down their weapons and simply watch the woods. Humanity needs to learn that lesson too. We've proven we can fight. Now we need to prove we can live peacefully with the species around us. That's going to be harder than any battle." Sarah smiled at the message, thinking about those early morning hunts in the cold Montana wilderness, watching elk move through the trees while her grandfather whispered lessons about patience, respect, and the sacred responsibility of the hunter. Those lessons had saved her crew, had changed humanity's trajectory in the galaxy, and now would hopefully help guide her species toward a future where they were known for more than just their ability to win battles. The galaxy continued to watch, but now they watched with a different kind of attention. Humanity had awakened their hunter instinct when survival demanded it. Now came the more challenging task, proving that humans could be trusted with that instinct, that they could be predators when necessary, but partners in peace when possible. The broadcast feeds showed Captain Sarah Chen returning to her ship, returning to her duties, returning to the constant work of navigating humanity's place among the stars. The Endeavour launched from Haven Station, its mission parameters now expanded from exploration to include diplomatic escort and tactical consultation. Behind it, the galaxy was already changing, adapting to the new reality that humanity had forced into existence. The Council had seen it broadcast live, humanity's hunter instinct awakened. What they would see in the years to come was whether that instinct could be tempered with wisdom, whether the species that had clawed its way to dominance on a harsh world could learn to walk gently among the stars. The future was unwritten, but for the first time since humanity had reached for the cosmos. They would write it as equals among the galactic community, respected and perhaps feared, but no longer dismissed as insignificant newcomers. The great hunt had ended. The greater challenge of building lasting peace had only just begun. And somewhere in the cold dark between the stars, humanity's ships patrolled and explored, carrying with them the legacy of millions of years spent learning to survive against impossible odds, ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy might throw at them next.